Up next, we take a look at criticism artists like Snoop Dogg and Nelly have received for performing at events related to or connected to the inauguration of President Trump, and discuss what people who may not have voted for Trump should be expected to do now that he takes office. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man who's always ready to put some flavor in your ear. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, you ready to get down today?
Yes, sir. Craig Mack style.
All right. Now, before we get started,
just so you know, I recognize it. That's all.
Oh yeah, for sure. I appreciate the hat tip. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you subscribe and like the show on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. Now, recording on January 21st, 2025. And jumping right in today, we saw many artists perform at inauguration-related events, and a few were getting substantial criticism and pushback online. Artists like Snoop and Nelly, lots of criticism, for performing at these events and quote-unquote supporting Trump or, just lending their fame and popularity to the inauguration events. And, some of this criticism was very extreme. Oh, I'm never going to listen to these people again. Some of it was just calling out, looking at older comments that Snoop had made, for example. But Tunde, what are your thoughts on this backlash received? Do you think it's fair? And what do you think that this is, or do you think this is something that's gone too far?
I don't know. I'll say this. I don't know about fair or unfair. I mean, look, first of all, we live in a country with freedom of speech. So everyone does have a right to share their opinions about how they feel about things. But I guess what I feel like is it's kind of, it perpetuates more of this kind of constant outrage that we see and this constant reactionary behavior that I feel like we see in our media, just general media, and kind of it's the way our society, the way we deal with each other now. And I recognize, because the way you brought it in, the intro here, pointed out certain things that, he said things negative about Donald Trump in the past, and said things I read, about the 2017 inauguration, was bashing anyone that thought to perform there. And now he's supporting this inauguration, or, the ball of the crypto ball. I mean, he wasn't formally asked to be part of the inauguration, but I get it. He said yes to something on behalf of Donald Trump, and it's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and I'm sure some people are very happy about it. So,
well, and he, in that instance, is Snoop. Snoop had specific comments back in 2017 about criticizing people that would perform at the inauguration. And Snoop, to be fair, 100%, it wasn't an actual inauguration event. It was an event taking place that was connected to the inauguration, but it wasn't a formal, and it was a crypto ball that was, with people that were there for the inauguration, but it wasn't an inauguration event.
Yeah, but that's my point, is saying that whether it was officially or not, obviously it's connected to Donald Trump's win and him becoming president, and people are going to associate Snoop Dogg now with having said yes to Donald Trump about something. And I think that's my point, is saying it's a little bit similar, not 100%, but to some of the criticism I saw when both Trump and Obama were sitting next to each other at the Jimmy Carter funeral, and looked like they just behaving like two normal human beings. And a lot of people just had a problem with that. And so I think this is going to be, personally, I don't care about the two men sitting next to each other having a good time, or Snoop saying yes to performing at anything involved with Trump. I'm for me personally, it's like, all right, this is the world we're in. And, should everybody be constantly boycotting everything Donald Trump does from this day on for the next 4 years? No, I don't think so. So that's my general stance on it. So I'll pass it back to you.
I feel you. I think we can distinguish here from, like, if Snoop was let's say, or Nelly were performing at a grand opening of a Trump hotel, that to me would be a different thing than the inauguration type of things. Like, the inauguration is supposed to be for all Americans. That's not necessarily just for Trump. Like, that is, and I think Nelly made that point. Like, this is something that is about the United States of America and the transfer of power and peaceful transfer of power and all these other things. And you cannot support Donald Trump and still recognize the importance and the tradition behind the inauguration and recognize that it's a significant event. And I think that's kind of we can't all be always in hyper partisan mode. Like, granted, yes, if you're not happy that Trump won, then you might be emotional and say, oh, well, I hope that people I like don't go and help them make it a great inauguration or make it a nice, make it a great inauguration wasn't really intentional, but the idea that you don't want to help them, put on a good show and everything like that. But I mean, at a certain point, you got to give it a rest. This isn't constructive to say, oh, well, Snoop shouldn't perform at this crypto ball or Nelly shouldn't perform at the inauguration because we just don't like Donald Trump. Like, you can't just be in this constant emotional. And I think you're right. Like, it's interesting to bring, like, this is kind of what our media kind of is trying to put us in these camps all the time, where we're constantly angry and emotional about everything. And this just really doesn't strike me as something to be really emotional about. Like, this is the inauguration. The dude won, if you're happy about whether he won, if you're not, if you think he won fair and square, if you don't, he won. I mean, we're moving forward right now, and the time for all that stuff is past. And so we move forward. We have the inauguration. That's something, again, for all Americans, that we continually able to have these inaugurations and peaceful transfer of power is something we should all be proud of. So I understand the emotional reaction, and I'm not going to condemn the emotional reaction of people being mad about it. I think, hey, if that's you, that's fine. I just think you should understand that you're just being emotional. It's not constructive. That's you, seeing your ex on Instagram and just hating, you know what I'm saying? Just being mad, you know what I mean? Like, oh, man, they over there having a good time, yada, yada, yada. Like, that's what that is. And that's human. And so, whatever. I'm not going to say that something's wrong with a person who's doing that, but let's just all recognize that, yeah, that's just an emotional reaction, which you're allowed to have, and it's not constructive at all, Hey,
man, why you got to bring up painful memories for people? Come on. That's not fair. It's you got somebody out there thinking about their ex, and when they saw them
some painful
on social media, having dinner with somebody they don't like, the whole thing, man.
Yeah, that person's already hot about the inauguration, and now it made it worse.
As you said that, I think that's how a lot of people felt with Obama and Trump sitting next to each other. And I'm sure it was both sides. I'm sure there's Trump fans that hated to see Trump, having a good time with Obama. There's Obama fans that definitely hated to see Obama having a good time with Trump. But see, that's the
gamification that we got to watch out for, because it's like, okay, you see that also with, like, that's kayfabe. That's that WWE type of stuff where it's like, oh, well, the Iron Sheik can't be seen at a bar with Hulk Hogan because that breaks the facade.
It's funny, James, because look, I'll say it this way. I'm the type of person that, and not to sit here toot my own horn, hopefully no one thinks I'm doing that, but I tend to observe how I feel in these moments, and then I kind of introspect, and, we all can learn a lot about ourselves. And when I saw Obama and Trump having a good time at the Carter funeral, it made me feel good, honestly. Like, I just was like, oh, that's cool. Fucking two guys can get along, like that. And I get it, how people feel. Like you said, it's a great analogy you say, is like a lot of people do react emotionally and are triggered, let me say it that way, in the same way that, like you say, if they see someone they care about, an ex or a very close family member, kind of just, caucusing or hobnobbing with someone who they really feel like they don't like. And we all understand what that initial kind of feeling, that triggering feeling is. And that's what I'm saying. Like looking at how people are so emotional and react to these things. And also, I mean, let's extrapolate this out into a bigger picture. Like, what does that mean for us, as individuals in our own personal life? Like, I'm just saying, like, if I'm walking around all day triggered because I'm upset about who's talking to who on that I see on the news, or because some artist performed. I mean, like, the people that are as angry about Snoop performing at the Trump inauguration, to me, are as delusional and emotionally over their skis, let me put it that way, as the people that were so upset about Taylor Swift during the Super Bowl, literally 11 months ago, or almost a year ago, because she just told people to vote. And then all these people are making this huge opinion about what a celebrity is doing based around their politics. And or before Snoop, it was the country singer who was going to sing for the inauguration now. And so Carrie Underwood. And so that's all I'm saying, James, is when I look at this, I'm looking at, man, so many people who consider themselves on different ends of the political spectrum behave the same way. They just get hysterical when there's something they think
is that the same thing is happening to them. Like that, what they're consuming, the environments that they're placing themselves in is taking them to these places. Because I think that's a good analogy. I mean, I think, Jelly Roll, another artist, got some criticism a couple months back about this, and his comments were similar to Nelly. Like, look, this is the office of the president. Like if Biden wants me to, ask me to do something, I'm going to do it because, like, that's cool. The president asked me. If Trump, when he's the president or about to be president, he asked me to do something, I'm going to do that too. Because that's me interacting with the office of the president for the country that I love, so to speak. And so, but for people in this, that are in this kind of, I don't want to say bubble, but a lot of us are being driven into these bubbles, these silos or whatever you want to call it, in terms of the media that we're consuming, where it's turning us into that. It's turning us into Yankee fans and Red Sox fans, and we're just kind of looking at everything the other one does as being negative. And ultimately, like, I do have ideological disagreements with the president that's taking office right now, but I have to recognize, and I have to sober myself to a certain degree, that that's not all that there is. That's not all there is. And then we'll talk in a second about, okay, so if that is the case, what are there more constructive ways to deal with it? But I'm reminded just kind of the so many things, the way that our country was set up, and with like a president like George Washington directly addressing this type of stuff, we're set up to try to tame these passions that they understand that they understood that we feel. We can see that we feel these passions when we get kind of partisan or home teamish, about these things, where we start getting angry and mad about things that aren't really that serious, and then we get so caught up and we can't see the big picture because it's like we're so emotional, which, by the way, is very profitable for media companies, so there's a benefit. There's someone actively trying to put people in this state because there is a profit motive to put people in this state. But to try to control these passions of men, and I mean, George Washington went so far as to condemn political parties. Period. Say, like, look, if you guys have parties, if we have parties, this is what's going to happen. And so he lost that kind of fight. But nonetheless, we got to be aware of these things because there are places where we should be fighting and arguing and making our case, and there are places where it's like, well, actually, this isn't it. Like, at least, again, from being constructive, it's normal to have the natural emotional reaction, which, again, have it all you want, but just know in your mind that it's not something that's not taking you to a place that's going to help you get what you ultimately want. That's just going to have you spinning your wheels, and maybe there's a psychological payoff at some point. Great, but you'll still be in the same position 4 years later or 2 years later or whatever, if that's the end of your kind of interaction with it. So, but I do want to ask you, well, go ahead real quick. Yeah,
no, I was going to say, because what you're describing there, the passions, is kind of normal humanity.
Yeah.
Just normal human societies. And what you're alluding to with George Washington and the way that this country was established, I mean, and you've said it in different discussions, that's what has made America exceptional.
Yeah, that's what makes America an exception, which by definition makes America exceptional. It's like we are. Go ahead. Intentionally,
but that's what I mean. Like let's call it out. What is it that makes America exceptional? Is that the system was designed to set up to try and help us as humans go around our passions, right, and be able to compromise. That's the co-equal branches of government. The judiciary, the legislative,
all these things
the
intentionally
branch.
Done. Yes, correct.
Yep. The fact we have a House of Representatives and a Senate, the idea that they need to compromise, before legislation is sent to the president for signature, all that. So there's a lot of mechanisms that were put in place on purpose. And the reason why I want to just stay on this is because as you're talking, it makes me realize that this whole thing with left and right in the United States culture today is very similar to kind of, if you look at what the founding fathers' backdrop was of the prior kind of 100, 150 years, was the Catholics and Protestants in in England primarily. And really, what is that? It was kind of like a slow moving iceberg war, like battle of culture and ideas of how to best deal with Christianity and all that. Today, we're doing it based on how to best set up the United States, whether Democrat or Republican. And at the end of the day, if George Washington were to take a time machine to today, he might ask us, hey, who won that battle between the Protestants and the Catholics? And what would we say today? We'd kind of say, well, no one really won. It kind of just diffused, and both still exist and they coexist and all that. And I feel like we should learn from that lesson, because I'm going to assume in times like the 100 Years' War, I mean, to think about 100 years is a long time. That's more than a whole lifespan for a human. That people were fighting about how to best interpret basically Christianity, right? Whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant. Today, it might be Shia and Sunni in the Middle East. And here in America, it's Democrat, Republican, liberal versus conservative. So I think if we can take that long arc and look, if we got in a time machine and fast forward 200-300 years and ask somebody, hey, who won between like the MAGA and the Democrats or the red and the blues in America, that person would probably look at us the same way we look at the Catholic and Protestant and say, well, no one really won. It kind of diffused itself. But in the interim, looking back, a lot of people got hurt trying to have these arguments. And I just think we can learn from taking a look at, that period of time.
Factions, like having these perpetual factions, it's not constructive at the very least. Like you wouldn't say that the Christianity became stronger because of that, for sure. Yeah, and exactly. So like you can look at it and say, well, this isn't something that's going to make America stronger, So, but looking forward, is there, we talk about what's not constructive and so forth. And so, but do you think there are constructive ways that people who may not have agreed with, like these people that are upset about Snoop or upset about Nelly or whatever, like, are there constructive ways or ways that would be more constructive for their energy to be spent right now? I mean, ways that may not be as profitable for media companies, but nonetheless, things that are there. I mean, what should they be doing? Should they be trying to like boycott everything? Or should it be targeted and say, okay, well, we may not going to engage here, but we are going to engage there or anything like that? What do you think?
No, I think number one, you make a good point about the kind of media that probably, I'm sure, no matter what people try and do, that someone's going to try and profit off making eyeballs out of it. Exactly. So we have to accept that. But I do think yes. I mean, so I think there's a couple things going on. One is my answer would be yes. I do think people should not do the traditional resist and all this stuff if you disagree with Donald Trump or, his administration going forward. I think number one is people should have a little bit of patience to step back and let things play out. Let's see what happens. Because again, you also don't want to be Chicken Little or the sky's falling or the boy that cried wolf if a lot of the fears that people have don't come to pass. Now, I personally believe that pretty much everything we heard from Donald Trump come out of his mouth on the campaign trail, he's going to attempt to do. I totally believe that. But I'm not going to be in the street, with my hair on fire about any of it. Let's see what happens. If some of it deserves a hair on fire, then maybe I'll burn some of this hair I don't have. And and if it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, I think that's kind of a couple things. Like when you look at whether it's the hip hop performers that we discuss, or even the tech bros, people like Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, people that we know have not been allies, let's say, to Trump and MAGA in the past. I think when we're seeing all these different groups and factions participate in the inauguration and kind of look like they're giving this endorsement to the incoming administration, I think there's a lot to be said there. Number one is it's all about power. I mean, and that's not abnormal. This isn't new to Trump. This is every president. People want to cozy up to power. But I do think there's something of a kind of tacit or unspoken admission that Trump won. He won the popular vote. This is the second time he's going to be president. The country has had a long time to vet him now. It's been a decade. And, so I do think that this is a sign of a cultural shift, kind of like the Reagan Revolution of 1980. It's people have seen what's going on. And I think they're saying, look, this, like you said, if he's president again and I'm asked or invited to participate, this time I'm going to go and check it out. Unlike last time, when it was more of a resistance. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a wait and see.
Those are loaded terms, though, because a resistance versus resisting things you may not agree with is like a resistance actually references something that has existed. People considered themselves the resistance and they were going to push back on everything he did almost in a way that, and I think this is what I would caution against. Like I remember in 2009, and Rush Limbaugh in 2008, 2009, Rush Limbaugh's out there saying, we want Obama to fail. And, we're just complaining about everything he does. And everything that he does, we're going to push back against. And so I would imagine that that's not the approach that people from the center left would want to take. Is that, okay, yeah, we're just going to do what Rush Limbaugh did, but in the inverse to Trump. So I think also that and I do think that when he goes too far, when he says, okay, I'm going to do something that's against the law or against the Constitution, I do think we should push back as we the people. I mean, that's kind of what our role is in this political system. That's why there's freedom of speech and so forth. So pushing back is one thing, if there's lawsuits filed and all that other kind of stuff. But I do think that part of the problem that we have now, there have been so many warnings for so long about so many things that are going to happen, and he was elected anyway. And so some of that, at this point, some of this stuff has to play out because clearly the warnings, oh, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, the warnings aren't working. So it has to play out and people have to see it. This is kind of like that living memory thing. Something like we lived through the Great Recession, so to speak, because the living memory of what led to the Great Depression faded away. And then the deregulation happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, which led us to another crash. Like that wouldn't have happened in 1970 because there were still too many people alive that saw the lead up to the Great Depression and what the deregulation did. And they would have been like, no way. But once a certain number of people, once there's enough living memory that's gone, societies do tend to make the same mistakes over and over again. So all of this smart people warning like, hey, well, once we go down this road, this might happen and this might happen, and this might happen. All that's been said. And in the face of all that, this guy got put in the office. So at this point, and this is not something that, that is exciting to say, but at this point, some of this stuff has to play out so that you can say then, see, this is what happened when you allow this to happen. And, or when you go this direction in a society. And so like, I think the focus for people who don't, who either ideologically or just in general aren't supportive of Trump's agenda, it has to be about internal. It has to be about organizing and bringing in new leadership. Clearly, the leadership that has brought you to this point can't get the job done. Like those people should not be in the leadership anymore. Like they need to be moved out. You need a new generation of leadership coming up because the people that are there are ineffective and ill-equipped to deal with the world as it is today, regardless of whatever they've done in the past. And also bring in new ideas because clearly your ideas aren't resonating, to the same degree. So this is a time to kind of look inward and figure out how you can best sell the American people on a better vision than just, you can't go to that guy because that what you just did failed despite all of the dire warnings that you had. And so, I think that's where you got to be constructive is again, organize new leadership, new ideas, and new ways to present this stuff. Because this is the way our country works is you're going to have another bite at the apple here coming up pretty soon. And if you're recycling the same stuff that you did 2 years ago, 4 years ago, and all the other stuff, you might end up with the same results. And then that's only your fault then at that point, because you spent all this time just every step of the way complaining and saying, oh, this is going to be the end of the world. Oh, this is going to be the end of the world. Oh, this is going to be the end of the world. It's like, well, that message isn't going to keep working out for you, especially if it hasn't in the past. So any last thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just, I agree with everything you said. And I think it's just, it's interesting to watch this because, the pushback specifically to the hip hop artists, I think, and like we seem to be agreeing that everyone needs to kind of take a step back and let this play out because I 100% agree with you that the Democrats, this election proved that for whatever reason, lost the confidence of the country and were unable to gain it because after it's all said and done now, it looks like Donald Trump won the election by 400,000 more votes than he received in 2020. But Kamala Harris received millions of votes less than Joe Biden. So clearly that's evidence of that fact, that Democrats were not able to motivate the country. But then the Republican, this is why I find this all interesting, these strange bedfellows, because I one thing I like about seeing Snoop Dogg and these guys accept the invitation to enter into the MAGA space is on the same day that apparently Snoop and Nelly perform at the inauguration ball, Elon Musk was somewhere else on a stage giving what appeared to be a Sieg Heil, a Nazi salute. So what I'm saying is, it's going to be interesting to see how this new big tent of the Trump era Republican Party and American right deal with this. And my point is that I'd rather see people like Snoop Dogg, somewhat within that tent, because that means they got to get dealt with too, and they're going to be able to hopefully have some sort of conversation within those tents as well, versus them not being in there at all. So I think we all got to wait and see how this plays out.
That's true. The only concern you have there is whether or not those people, this isn't specific to Snoop, or whoever, but just whoever's in that tent, whether they're on there on their own accord or whether they're on there on some larger accord for people that may be similar to them. And that's what that's the risk you run in this situation, is that everybody might be just, like Zuckerberg might be just looking out for his own butt. He might not be in that tent saying, hey, well, we got to make sure that we take care of Jewish people too. So you can't always project onto someone just because they're there that they're going to represent some larger interest. And so, but I think, it's got to play out. I mean, and you point to the Musk thing, like that's, people were everybody's warning, like this stuff is fascist and this is this and that and this is that. Well, like you got to let Elon Musk show you, or show society that that's what this is, and then have better approaches for how to get that information out than you had in the past as well. And so that's what I mean. Like there's work that needs to be done internally for the people who just lost this round, because even if the things play out as bad as you warn or somewhere near that, you got it. The way you were messaging before didn't work. And so you got to come up with ways that you can message these things in the future. So ultimately, again, the emotional reaction is, we both agree there. The emotional reaction is understandable. It's human. It's natural. But just catch yourself early enough in that, once you do it, like have it, you let that release out or whatever, but know that that's not going to get you any closer to where you want to get in society. So if that's what you want to do, you're going to have to move from the emotion to the constructive sooner rather than later. So, but I think we can wrap this topic from there. We appreciate everybody.
That's boring though. It's fun to be emotional.
There's a release, there's a release involved. I mean, hey, that's guided, human societies for a long time, being constructive, be damned. So, but hopefully we can take some of this energy though and move it in a direction to deliver different results in the future. But yeah, we appreciate y'all for joining us on this part of this episode. Join us on part 2 as well, and we'll talk to you soon.